a melody remembered. The winter air carried a crisp promise of snow as Marcus Jin adjusted his worn messenger bag and glanced at his watch. He was running late again. The corporate holiday party at Silverton Industries wasn't exactly his scene, but his daughter Emma had insisted he attend. At 8 years old, she had a way of seeing through his excuses with those knowing brown eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "Dad, you need to get out more," Emma had said that morning, braiding her own hair with the practiced efficiency of a child who'd grown up too fast. "Mrs. Patterson says the office parties have really good desserts." Marcus smiled at the memory as he pushed through the revolving doors of the downtown high-rise. The lobby gleamed with expensive marble and fresh garland. His fingers, calloused from years of playing piano in small venues and teaching lessons, felt out of place against the polished brass of the elevator buttons. He wasn't supposed to be here at all. Marcus worked in the IT department, usually tucked away in the basement where the servers hummed their constant song. But the company had mandated attendance this year, something about building morale and community. He tried to decline, but his supervisor had been firm. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened to reveal a transformation. The executive floor had been converted into a winter wonderland. White lights sparkled like stars across the ceiling. A massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated in silver and gold. Well-dressed employees clustered in groups, champagne flutes in hand, their laughter mixing with soft background music. Marcus tugged at his collar. His gray button-down shirt and dark jeans felt decidedly casual among the sea of cocktail dresses and tailored suits. He spotted the refreshment table and made his way toward it, hoping to grab something to drink and find a quiet corner to wait out the mandatory hour. That's when he saw the piano. It stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a beautiful grand piano that reflected the city lights beyond. Someone had placed a small arrangement of white roses on its closed lid. The sight of it made Marcus's chest tighten with a familiar longing. He hadn't played in front of people in months, not since the small cafe where he used to perform had closed down. "It's just for decoration," a voice said beside him. Marcus turned to see James from accounting, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Shame, really? Beautiful instrument just sitting there." Marcus nodded, accepting the offered glass even though he rarely drank. "Yeah, shame." As James wandered off to join another conversation, Marcus found himself drawn toward the piano. His fingers itched to touch the keys, to feel that connection between heart and sound that had sustained him through the hardest years of his life. After his wife Sarah had died 3 years ago, music had been his lifeline, the only way he knew how to process grief that felt too big for words. He set down his wine glass and gently lifted the lid. The keys gleamed, pristine and perfectly maintained. Without thinking, he sat down on the bench. The room buzzed with conversation around him, but it all seemed to fade as he let his fingers rest on the cool ivory. He began to play. The melody came from somewhere deep inside, a song he'd written years ago when he was young and full of dreams. It was during that summer he'd spent in Boston, working at a music camp while trying to decide if he should pursue composition seriously. He'd met someone that summer, a girl with green eyes and auburn hair who'd listened to him play for hours, her presence like sunlight filtering through trees. Her name had been Claire. They'd spent 3 months together, talking about art and ambition, walking through the public garden, sharing dreams that felt possible in the golden haze of youth. He'd written this melody for her, something gentle and hopeful, with an undercurrent of bittersweet longing because they both knew the summer would end. And it had. Claire had been accepted to a prestigious business program in New York. Marcus had stayed in Boston, eventually moving back to Chicago to be near his aging parents. They'd exchanged letters for a while, then emails, but life had pulled them in different directions. He'd heard through mutual friends that she'd married someone in finance, built an impressive career. He'd moved on too, met Sarah, built a different kind of beautiful life. But this melody had stayed with him, a little piece of that summer preserved in notes and chords. The room around him had grown quieter. Marcus was so absorbed in the music that he didn't notice the crowd gathering, didn't see the people pulling out their phones to record, didn't notice the woman in the red dress who had frozen near the refreshment table, her hand pressed to her mouth. Claire Donovan had been making her rounds as CEO, doing what was expected at these corporate gatherings, smiling and making small talk even though her mind was already on the quarterly reports waiting in her office. She'd built Silverton Industries from a mid-sized firm to an industry leader over the past 12 years, pouring everything she had into the work. It had cost her a marriage, countless personal relationships, and most of her spontaneity, but she told herself it was worth it. Then she heard the melody. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined it, some trick of memory triggered by the holiday nostalgia that had been creeping up on her lately. But no, someone was actually playing it. That exact song, with all the delicate nuances she remembered from 28 years ago. Her heart hammered as she turned toward the piano. She couldn't see the player's face from where she stood, just his profile, the concentration in his posture, the gentle confidence of his hands on the keys. The gray shirt, the tousled dark hair touched with silver at the temples. It couldn't be. Claire moved through the crowd without conscious thought, her expensive heels clicking on the polished floor. People stepped aside for her automatically, the way they always did, but she barely noticed. The melody wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, carrying her back to those walks along the Charles River, to late nights in a practice room where a young man with kind eyes had played music that seemed to understand her better than she understood herself. Marcus finished the piece with a soft, lingering chord that seemed to hover in the air. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then applause erupted around him, startling him back to the present. He blinked, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him, the phones pointed in his direction. "That was beautiful," someone said. "Where did you learn to play like that? What's the name of that piece?" Marcus stood quickly, feeling his face flush. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I just—" He looked up and found himself staring directly into eyes he hadn't seen in nearly 3 decades. Claire stood less than 5 feet away, and in that instant, the years seemed to collapse. She'd changed, of course. Her hair was styled in a professional cut that fell just past her shoulders, the auburn now highlighted with subtle shades of gold. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. But her eyes were the same, that particular shade of green that reminded him of sea glass. "Claire?" The name came out as barely a whisper. She nodded, unable to speak. Around them, the crowd had quieted again, sensing something significant happening but not understanding what. "How?" Marcus shook his head, trying to process the impossibility of this moment. "How do you know this song?" Claire found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "You wrote it. That summer in Boston. You played it for me on your last night before you left for Chicago." The murmur of recognition rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "That's the CO." Someone else said, "I didn't know they knew each other." Marcus felt like the floor had shifted beneath his feet. You're the CO?" A small, almost sad smile touched Claire's lips. Surprise. They stood there, either quite knowing what to say, while around them the party continued its momentum. Someone turned up the background music. Conversations resumed. But in the small space around the piano, time seemed suspended. "I heard you moved to New York," Marcus said finally. "Columbia, right? Business school?" "I did. Then Wharton for my MBA." Claire gestured vaguely at the room around them. "Eventually ended up here. What about you? Are you still composing?" Marcus laughed, but there was no bitterness in it. "Not exactly. I'm in IT here, actually. Basement level. I teach piano on the side, play some small gigs when I can." "IT?" Claire's surprise was genuine. "But you were so talented. You were going to study at Berkeley. Life had other plans." Marcus glanced toward the windows, seeing his reflection ghosted against the night sky. "My dad got sick that fall. I stayed in Chicago to help out. Met someone, got married, had a daughter. The music became more of a companion than a career." The past tense in "got married" hung in the air. Claire caught it but didn't pry. Instead, she said, "I'd love to hear more. Would you like to get some coffee? There's a quiet lounge on this floor." Marcus hesitated, thinking of Emma waiting at home with Mrs. Patterson. But his daughter had told him to get out more, to live a little. And there was something in Claire's eyes, a kind of loneliness, he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror. "I'd like that." he said. The executive lounge was all leather furniture and soft lighting, with a coffee station that looked more sophisticated than any cafe Marcus had been to. Claire poured them both cups with steady hands, though inside she felt anything but steady. They sat across from each other in chairs positioned near a window. The city spread up below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "I'm sorry I lost touch," Claire said, cradling her cup. "After that first year, everything just got so busy and I—" "Don't apologize." Marcus's voice was gentle. "We were kids. We had different paths to walk. Were you happy?" The question came out before Claire could stop it. "In your marriage, I mean." "I'm sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's okay." Marcus looked down at his coffee. "I was very happy. Sarah was, she was wonderful. Patient, kind, great with kids. She taught second grade and made the world better just by being in it." His voice caught slightly. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." "Oh, Marcus." Claire's professional composure cracked, showing genuine sorrow. "I'm so sorry." "Thank you." He took a sip of coffee, using the moment to steady himself. "It's been hard, but Emma, our daughter, she keeps me going. She's 8 now. Smart as a whip and twice as stubborn." A real smile crossed Claire's face. "She sounds amazing." "She is." Marcus looked at Claire with open curiosity. "What about you? The rumor mill downstairs says you're unmarried, but that can't be right." "Divorced, actually. 5 years now." Claire set down her cup. "Richard was in finance. We met at a conference, seemed perfect on paper. Both ambitious, both driven. But it turned out we were better at building careers than building a life together." She paused. "No kids. We always said we'd have them later, but later never came." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd lived enough life to understand that some things couldn't be fixed with words. "I think about that summer sometimes," Claire admitted. "More than I probably should. The music, the conversations, the feeling that anything was possible." "Me too," Marcus said. "I even went back once, about 15 years ago. Walked through the same places we used to go. Sat in the garden and wondered what you were doing, if you were happy. What made you play that song tonight?" Marcus considered the question. "I don't really know. Something about the moment felt right. Or maybe I just needed to remember who I used to be before life got complicated." Claire leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask you something? And please be honest." "Of course. Do you regret it? Not pursuing music more seriously?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, really thinking about it. 5 years ago, I might have said yes. When Sarah was sick and the medical bills were piling up and I was working 2 jobs just to keep our heads above water, there were nights I wondered if I'd made the wrong choices." He looked up, his eyes clear. "But no, I don't regret it. The music is still part of me. I get to share it with my students, with Emma. And I had years with someone I loved deeply. That's not a consolation prize. That's a life well lived." Something in Claire's chest tightened. "You always were wise beyond your years. I think you're confusing wisdom with acceptance." Marcus smiled. "What about you? Any regrets?" Claire laughed, but it sounded tired. "Where do I start? I regret the 80-hour weeks that cost me my marriage. I regret missing my sister's wedding because of a deal that fell through anyway. I regret—" She stopped, surprised by the emotion rising in her throat. "I regret not having someone to play me songs on a random Tuesday evening. That's specific. It's true though. I've built something impressive here, I know that. But lately, I've been wondering what it's worth if there's no one to share it with. No one who remembers who I was before I became this." She gestured at her expensive dress, her perfectly styled hair. Marcus reached across and gently touched her hand. "The Claire I knew is still in there. I can see her." The simple kindness of the gesture broke something loose in Claire. Her eyes filled with tears she was too tired to hold back. "God, I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart like this." "It's okay." Marcus handed her a napkin from the coffee station. "I'm fairly sure the executive lounge has some kind of confidentiality clause." She laughed through her tears. I think that only applies to mergers and acquisitions. They talked for another hour, catching up on the years between then and now. Marcus told her about Emma's love of science, about teaching piano to kids in his neighborhood, about the small moments of joy he'd learned to recognize after Sarah's death. Claire talked about the challenges of leading a company, the isolation that came with success, the growing feeling that she'd somehow missed a turn somewhere. I should let you get home, Claire said finally, glancing at her watch. It's getting late, and I'm sure your daughter is waiting. Probably asleep by now, but yeah. Marcus stood, then hesitated. Claire, I know this is probably crossing about 15 different company policies, but would you like to have dinner sometime? Nothing romantic or complicated, just two old friends reconnecting? Claire felt something light up inside her, something she thought had gone dormant years ago. I'd love that. But I have a condition. What's that? Bring Emma. I want to meet the person who keeps you going. Marcus's smile could have lit the room. She'd like that. Fair warning though, she asks about 1,000,000 questions and has very strong opinions about proper pizza toppings. I'll prepare myself accordingly. They exchanged phone numbers, and as they walked back toward the main party area, Claire felt lighter than she had in years. The gathering was winding down, people collecting coats and saying goodbyes. A few employees glanced curiously at their CEO walking alongside someone from IT, but Claire didn't care about the gossip this might generate. At the elevator, Marcus turned to her one more time. Thank you for tonight. For remembering that song. Thank you for playing it, Claire replied. For reminding me that some things are worth holding on to. The elevator doors closed, and Claire stood there for a moment, her reflection staring back at her from the polished metal. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like the future might hold something more than quarterly reports and board meetings. 3 weeks later, Claire found herself in a small Italian restaurant that definitely wasn't on any power lunch lists. The tablecloths were red-checkered, the lighting was warm rather than atmospheric, and a photograph of the owner's family from 1987 hung prominently on the wall. It was perfect. Emma Chin bounded through the door ahead of her father, her hair in 2 braids and her eyes bright with curiosity. She spotted Claire immediately and walked over with the unself-conscious confidence of childhood. Are you Ms. Donovan? Dad says you're important but that I should just call you Claire because you're friends. Claire laughed, charmed instantly. That's exactly right. And you must be Emma. Your dad tells me you're quite the scientist. I want to study marine biology, Emma announced, sliding into the booth. Did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts? I did not know that. It's true. And they're super smart. They can solve puzzles and everything. Marcus arrived at the table, slightly out of breath. Sorry, someone insisted on stopping to pet every dog we passed. There were 3 dogs, Dad. It would have been rude not to say hello. Over pasta and breadsticks, the 3 of them fell into an easy rhythm. Emma asked Claire about running a company. Is it like being the principal of a school? Sort of, but with more spreadsheets. And Claire found herself giving honest answers rather than the sanitized version she usually offered. Marcus watched the 2 most important females in his life connect, and something settled in his chest. After Sarah died, he'd worried that Emma would grow up without strong women in her life. His mother helped when she could, and there were teachers and neighbors, but this felt different. Natural. Dad's been practicing a new song, Emma confided to Claire. He won't tell me what it's for, but I think maybe he's trying to impress someone. Marcus's ears turned slightly red. Emma. What? It's true. Emma turned to Claire with an 8-year-old's complete lack of filter. Are you the someone? Claire met Marcus's eyes across the table, saw the vulnerability there mixed with hope. I hope so, she said softly. After dinner, they walked to a nearby park despite the December chill. Emma ran ahead to the playground, her purple jacket bright against the darkening sky. I'm sorry about the interrogation, Marcus said. She takes after her mother in the directness department. Don't apologize. She's wonderful. Claire watched Emma climb the jungle gym with fearless determination. You're doing an amazing job with— Most days I'm just trying to keep up. Marcus's breath made small clouds in the cold air. But she makes it easy to remember what matters. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Emma play. Then Claire said, "I've been thinking about what you said at the party. About acceptance versus wisdom. Yeah? I think I've been confusing success with satisfaction. Building something big with building something meaningful." She turned to him. "Being around you and Emma, I'm reminded that the two don't have to be the same thing." Marcus considered this. "Are you thinking about making changes?" "Maybe. I have a talented VP who's been dying for more responsibility. And I have resources I've never really used for anything except accumulating more resources." Claire smiled. "Your daughter mentioned something about marine biology. It got me thinking about the scholarship programs we could expand, the mentorship opportunities we're not pursuing. That sounds like you're planning to work even more, not less." "Different work," Claire corrected. "Work that connects to actual humans instead of just quarterly projections." Emma called out from the top of the slide. "Claire! Dad! Watch this!" They watched as she slid down with her arms raised like an Olympian, landing with a triumphant hop at the bottom. "Did you see? That was my fastest time yet." "Very impressive," Claire called back, and Emma beamed before running off to try again. "She likes you," Marcus observed. "The feeling is mutual." "Claire." Marcus turned to face her fully. "I need to be clear about something. I'm not the young musician you knew in Boston. I have responsibilities, complications, a whole life that can't just be put on pause for romance." "I know. And you're the CEO of the company I work for, which is its own kind of complicated." "Also true. But I'd really like to see where this goes," Marcus finished. "If you're willing to navigate the messiness." Claire reached for his hand, her fingers warm despite the cold. "Marcus, I've spent the last 20 years building something perfect and pristine and ultimately empty. I think I'm ready for a little messiness." Over the following months, they built something together. Not a fairy tale romance, but something more real and sustainable. Claire started leaving the office at reasonable hours, joining Marcus and Emma for dinners and weekend outings. She taught Emma about business and leadership. Emma taught her about octopuses and the importance of having fun. Marcus taught them both that there was more than one way to compose a life worth living. The gossip at Silverton Industries ran wild for a while, but Claire addressed it directly in a staff meeting. "Yes, Marcus Chun and I are dating. No, it doesn't affect his job performance or mine. If anyone has concerns about favoritism, my door is open." The directness effectively ended most of the whispers. Marcus kept his ID job, kept teaching piano, kept being exactly who he was. But he also started composing again, finding that the music flowed more easily now that his heart wasn't carrying all the weight alone. One evening in early spring, as the three of them sat in Claire's apartment watching Emma build an elaborate octopus habitat out of cardboard boxes, Claire realized something. "I'm happy," she said aloud, almost surprised by the observation. Marcus looked up from where he was cutting out seaweed shapes. "Yeah? Yeah." Claire gestured at the chaos of craft supplies, at Emma's intense concentration, at the simple domesticity of the moment. "Not accomplished or successful or satisfied. Actually happy." Emma glanced over. "That's good, Claire. Dad says happiness is more important than fancy stuff. Dad's a smart man." "I know," Emma agreed. "He also makes really good pancakes. You should come over for breakfast tomorrow." "I'd love that." Later, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, worn out from crafting, Marcus and Claire stood by the window looking out at the city lights. "I never thought I'd get this again," Marcus admitted quietly. "After Sarah died, I assumed that chapter of my life was closed. One great love, and I should be grateful for having had it at all. And now? Now I'm learning that the heart has more capacity than we give it credit for." He turned to her. "I'll always love Sarah. She's part of my story, part of Emma's story. But that doesn't mean there's no room for new chapters." Claire leaned into him. "I spent so long trying to fill a void with achievements. Thinking if I just accomplished enough, earned enough, climbed high enough, I'd finally feel complete." She looked at Emma sleeping peacefully on the couch. "Turns out what I needed was smaller. Simpler. More real. You know this is going to be complicated," Marcus warned. Emma has bad days when she misses her mom. I have moments where the grief still hits me out of nowhere. And you're going to have crises at work that pull you away sometimes. I know. Claire smiled. I think I'm finally okay with complicated. Perfect was overrated anyway. They stood there together, two people who'd found each other twice across the years, learning that the best melodies often came from unexpected notes, played in the key of second chances. The song Marcus had written that summer in Boston had been about possibility and sweet longing. The life they were building now was a different kind of music entirely, more complex and richer, with harmonies that came from truly knowing another person, from choosing connection despite its challenges. And somewhere in the background of their lives, if you listened carefully, you could still hear that original melody, transformed now into something that acknowledged both loss and hope, both endings and new beginnings.